You know, when you start up your PS5, or two PS5s in my case, sometimes you are greeted by this really bright screen asking you to adjust certain HDR parameters. Many people don't know how to set these values correctly, whether you need to make the sun totally disappear, or leave it very faint just before it disappears. I've done a previous video explaining exactly how to do it right, but some of you complain that it's too long. For me, it is never too long. But now, Sony has announced a new feature that will bypass this process entirely and ask the PS5 to automatically set these values depending on the BRAVIA XR televisions that is connected to the console. And I will explain how this whole process works. So, Sony launched a new Perfect for PlayStation 5 campaign that aims to promote BRAVIA XR televisions as the best TVs to be paired up with the PS5. So, the X90J, the X95J, the A80J, the A90J, and the Z9J or Z9J will be the perfect television to be paired up with the PlayStation 5 according to Sony. And in a footnote, the X900H or XH90 from last year is also included, even though it is not actually a BRAVIA XR television. Now, there are two new features that Sony claims is exclusive to the PS5 that will be added to these TVs and the console with a firmware update. The first feature is Auto HDR Tone Mapping. The second feature is Auto Genre Picture Mode. Let's talk about Auto HDR Tone Mapping in the first place. When I read the description of how it works, it sounds like HGiG to me, but with a slight twist. The current implementation of HGiG on the Sony PS5 is you have to go into the Adjust HDR screen and set 3 parameters manually by looking at a test pattern containing the sun. You know, it is a manual process. It means that you have to go to the first screen and set the maximum full frame tone matte luminance or max FFTML. The second screen to set the maximum tone matte luminance or max TML. And the third screen to set the minimum tone matte luminance or min TML. But from the description of how Auto HDR Tone Mapping works, once a software update is rolled out, it will automatically detect the model number of the BRAVIA XR televisions and set these values correctly. And how this works can be gleaned from the official HGiG Best Practice Recommendations document. And if we look at this document here, I'm struck by this before and after photo of a racing game showing more highlight detail being retained after HGiG is applied. And you know, in the press release that is issued by Sony promoting the Perfect for PlayStation 5 BRAVIA TVs, we have a before and after photo of Gran Turismo 7. So maybe this scenario is inspired by what's in the HGiG documentation. But if we read the HGiG documentation, you can see that what the console manufacturer and also the display manufacturer can do is to communicate with each other and build a database, and this database will contain the model number of the display or the TV and predefined values of the maximum full frame tone matte luminance, the maximum tone matte luminance, and also the minimum tone matte luminance, therefore avoiding the manual process of the users having to set them manually. And of course, you know, the console manufacturer in this case is Sony, you know, with the PS5, and the display manufacturer in this case is again Sony. So it is probably fairly easy for them to communicate with each other. Boom, you know, that's how Auto HDR Tone Mapping came about. The PS5 will read the EDID of the BRAVIA XR televisions, and the EDID will tell the PlayStation 5 what TV is connected to the console. So for example, you have connected a Sony Master Series A90J OLED, and then the console will go into its database and retrieve the necessary minimum tone matte luminance, maximum tone matte luminance, and also maximum full frame tone matte luminance values, and then apply them automatically without needing any user intervention. Now, this is clearly a very elegant solution, and I think that this is the next level of HGiG, but I see two problems with this. And one of the problem is that this will only apply to HGiG compliant games, and not all games will be, HGiG compliant, even though I have to say that Many of the blockbuster titles on the PlayStation 5 have been HGiG compliant. Let's say Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, that's an HGiG game. Astro is an HGiG game, a free launch game on the PS5, and also Miles Morales is also an HGiG compliant game. But I can't help but think that there are some games out there that don't comply with HGiG, and that's where the Dolby Vision capabilities of the Xbox Series X can come in handy. So that is one limitation of Auto HDR Tone Mapping. Only HGiG compliant games can benefit from this feature. And the second problem I see with, trusting this 100% of the time is that it doesn't take into account ambient lighting, when you set these parameters. So, for example, let's say if you don't play in a dark room, if you play in a brighter room, you may want the minimum tone map luminance or min TML to be slightly brighter so that you can see some shadow detail. But by resorting to a database system, there is no way for the console to know exactly how much light is present in the room unless, they take into account the information that is being fed by the light sensor. But that will probably become too messy. But I will be interested to see how this is implemented, and I think once this feature is rolled out, I will be testing it against my own manual way of doing it. And I think at a certain level, I'm sure that the Sony PlayStation 5 will be allowing users to still manually override these automatic values that are retrieved from a database. So you can still go through the Adjust HDR, HGiG calibration process manually. And sometimes you just can't beat a good hand job. But that is from the point of view of the Auto HDR Tone Mapping. And we come to the second feature, which is Auto Genre Picture Mode. And this, to me, is already a feature that is present on current Sony TVs together with current PlayStation consoles. So I'm not entirely sure why Sony Electronics felt compelled to include this and promote it as an entirely new feature. If you read the small print, you can see that it works if auto picture mode is on, and it will automatically switch into game mode when a game is played and switch into a movie-centric mode when a Blu-ray or Netflix is played on the PS5. But this feature is already present on many Sony televisions together with PlayStation consoles, and I'm not even talking about the PS5, I'm talking about the PS4 Pro and the PS4. As long as you switch on auto picture mode on your Sony television, it will automatically switch into game mode when you start playing a game on a PlayStation console. So it is already present, so I'm not entirely sure why it is included in this campaign and promoted as such. And notably in this press release, I also see the lack of mention of VRR or variable refresh rate, and famously the PlayStation 5 still doesn't support VRR at this moment in time, and the Xbox Series X already does. So maybe that's why Sony avoided mentioning it. But I think VRR is an important component of next-gen console gaming experience. Variable refresh rate can avoid screen tearing, you can avoid frame drops, and you can potentially lower input lag. And I am in the process of testing the VRR mode on last year's Sony XH90 or X900H, which has just received a new firmware to enable VRR mode. And let's just say that I have some really interesting findings. But as I read through the press release, as with most features that are added by Sony, there is usually as many asterisks as the subtitles in a Gordon Ramsay cooking show, and these will usually lead to a small footnote stating that these features can only be enabled by a firmware update in the future. And the timeline that has been given for these Auto HDR Tone Mapping and Auto Genre Picture Mode features to be added differs between the US press release and also the UK press release. On the UK press release, we got a date of end of 2021, whereas on the US side, we have a date of end of January 2022. It is not too far apart, and for once, maybe the UK can be first at something. But I certainly look forward to testing these new features. especially the Auto HDR Tone Mapping function when they become available. In the meantime, if you want to get the best HDR game picture quality from HGiG compliant games through the Adjust HDR screen on the PS5, please click here for my explanation video.